Aubrey, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm Joe. I'm an admissions counselor at the College of St. Scholastica. We're happy to sponsor these chamber events, these workshops, and we're grateful for the partnership that we have with the chamber. So thank you. I always just like to stop in and alert everyone that fall is approaching. So September's coming up, and that's when classes start. So for those of you that have seen me before, you kind of know what's coming next. We got some programs. Master's programs, we got doctorates, we have certificates, which are kind of subsets of our master's programs. So in the Stender School, we have programs that are kind of more on the humanistic side, like our MBA. We have stuff that's a little more technical, data analytics. So something for anyone to get interested in. So yeah, summer's coming up. Summer's winding down, actually. Apps are going to be due. So take a look, tell your friends about the programs. I'm here as a resource. I work with a bunch of the Stender School programs. So feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm going to put my info and a link to all of our graduate programs in the chat here. So take a peek and just let me know if you need help or want to chat about anything. So thanks again. I'll turn it back to Aubrey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. So I now have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for today, Jebeh Edmunds. Jebeh is the founder and CEO of Jebeh Cultural Consulting, LLC. She is a veteran educator with over 18 years experience. Mrs. Edmunds has given numerous local and regional presentations related to diversity, African-American heritage, and cultural competency. She has a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of Minnesota Duluth and a post-bachelor's teaching certificate from the College of St. Scholastica. She graduated with a Master's of Science in Teaching from the College of St. Scholastica in May 2015. She's also the current Director of Education here at the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce. She lives in Duluth with her husband, Andy, and their two boys, Maxwell and Mateo. A quick note, this is intended to be a conversational session, so please feel free to ask questions either on audio or in the chat. There will also be time for questions at the end. Jebeh, thank you so much for joining us today to share more about implicit bias in the workplace and beyond, and strategies and best practices for improving workplace inclusion. I'll have you take it away.
Thank you, Aubrey. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you quickly. Let's see here. Screen. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our implicit bias session. Check your bias at the door. Like Aubrey said, hello, I'm Jebeh Edmunds, founder and CEO of Jebeh Cultural Consulting. I'm so happy to be with you all today. I am a proud Liberian American immigrant. I've been in this country for 40 years, as well as being an immigrant and learning in Minnesota primarily. I grew up in Coon Rapids and ventured my way up north to Duluth to attend UMD, and the rest is history. I'm so excited to share with you some really cool strategies of what you can do, especially your self-reflective work when it comes to your inclusion practices. So, I am on full screen. Hang on a second.
Just one moment, we're making an adjustment to the presentation.
Thank you for your patience. So our session objectives today is you're going to understand what implicit bias is. You are also going to get a link to do your own self-assessment of implicit bias from Harvard's Project Implicit. It's a wonderful study, as well as understanding the difference between micro and macroaggressions. Okay, so we all have biases. It's not just a white person's issue or a Black person's issue or a Latinx person's issues. We all have biases. We are all humans. And so things that we've experienced in our lives, things that were taught to us, things that were brought into our psyche has been all bias. And how we decipher it has always been a safety mechanism of fight, flight, and freeze. But when we talk and unearth the biases that we hold, and then we speak onto it, that's when it can become most dangerous. Now, implicit bias lies in our subconscious. And these are things, like I told you before, that was taught to you when you were a child by the adults in your lives, things you saw in the movies. I have to admit, my father, he loved Police Academy in the 80s. We can't play that movie now in 2023, but those are the things that came into my subconscious. There were files of watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as a kid. And there is a woman who delivers our mail every single day. But in my file folder, I have that sweet old Mr. McFeely, yep, that young, that older white gentleman that would come to the door and deliver his mail to Mr. Rogers. But that's in my file folder. So when I see people that don't match that file of my bias, that's when I have to do that self-reflective work to make a positive change. Now, what is a microaggression? If you're not familiar with the term, microaggressions are brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to certain individuals of that particular group. And a macroaggression is more of a large-scale overt aggression. Those are things that you would see, for example, a cross burning, or something that is doing bodily harm as well as behavioral harm. So those are the differences between the two. A lot of people find it hard to decipher what a microaggression is because it's so quick, it's so fast. And sometimes you and that aggressor are the only ones in the room, or you and that aggressor could be in a group of people, but it happens so quickly, you might have to second guess yourself and think, did that just happen? Did I hear that correctly? And so I'm going to share with you some examples of microaggressions that happened to me. These are the file folders that people had in their subconscious, and then they turned it into something verbal or something more overt. And I'm going to give you some examples so you can just feel what happened to me in those moments. Okay. How did you get hired? And I was one of the only Black teachers in our Duluth public schools. And I can't tell you how many times somebody would ask me that. Try not to be on CP time. CP is an acronym for colored people. So that person that said that phrase to me had that file folder that said, oh, she's Black, she must be late all the time at these instances. So I'm gonna give her some advice. Try not to be on CP time. Why can't I touch your hair? Oh my God, we got the Black teacher this year. And it wasn't a compliment. It was an insult to me. And that was the first night I met that family at open house. And I still had to walk their child to their desk and help them find their locker. I didn't expect you to be the teacher. Wow, there's a Black woman speaking and teaching in front of our children, but I didn't expect her to be the teacher. At least you get a month in reference to Black History Month. Newsflash, we don't get any discounts for that. Oh, I love your beautiful Black skin. Why do you always get picked to join this particular committee? How did you get in that particular building? I've worked in this district longer than you. It's okay if he called you the N-word. He's been through trauma. Don't be so sensitive. People spell my name wrong all the time. Let that sit with you for a minute. Now, when I experience these microaggressions, a lot of people say, Jeb, why don't you shout? Why don't you say something? A lot of the times as a woman of color, when I am in these instances, I have to think about my reaction to that phrase or that insult. For example, as a woman of color, and a lot of people of color can attest to this, we have been trained, especially in American society, of rules, underwritten rules to do, so you are not perceived as a threat. So when I get those kinds of statements at me, I have to think very long and hard. My natural reaction, of course, would be anger, but will my anger suffer at the hands of my reputation professionally, my children's reputation, retaliation towards me and my family? Because my number one priority every day is to get home alive and safe. So when I'm getting these types of comments and you think to yourself, well, Jeb, I don't know how I would react in situations like that. I have to think of plan B, C, D, E, and F. And a lot of those strategies I'm going to teach you today at the end of this talk that you can do to help be an advocate when things like this happen. Because trust me, they happen all the time. And these microaggressors, they're comfortable. They feel like they can speak with their bravado. Now it's time for us to help check and correct them in real time. And that's the look I give them, like, oh, oof, yeah, that hits. And that's kind of something, that pause that I give of, oh my goodness, how am I going to react? There's so much weighing on me socially in my social capital, because how many Jebehs are there, especially in our region, right? Think about that. There's 3 different types of microaggressions I want you to be aware of. The verbal, and I gave you so many of those examples in the previous slide, but another one I've heard a lot is, oh, you're so pretty for a Black girl. That's a microaggression. Behavioral are the discriminatory acts that's hurtful for groups of people. Not from, it could be people of color, it could be people of different cultural groups. So for example, for behavioral, I would say chants. My boys used to play hockey, and they were, I'm the African hockey mom. And I would hear chants of people, grunting like monkeys when my children would skate on the ice. That is a behavioral microaggression, okay? Environmental microaggression is when a subtle discrimination happens within society. I have an example here of college campus buildings named only after white people. Another environmental microaggression I would like to share is my hometown of Coon Rapids, Minnesota, right? It's a part to be from the animal, but it is a cultural slur towards African Americans, calling an African American person a coon, right? So coming from Liberia with my parents as an immigrant, we didn't have that cultural verbiage of what a coon would be. But moving into that city and learning from other Black folks that live there, they would tell us, lie, say you're from Blaine, say you're from Minneapolis, because it is such a hurtful term. That's the environment, and that's how they won't change it, because it's too costly to change our logo. It's too costly to change all of the city names and verbiage and all of the red tape they would tell us. So that's an example of an environmental microaggression. Now, I want you to take a picture of your screen. Now, this is something I'm going to give you a homework. Once a teacher, always a teacher. And I want you to take this test. It's free. It's the Harvard Project Implicit Test. And they have over 18 different cultural categories that you can choose from. And these are very quick answering questions that you have to do. And you know you're going to flub a few times. You can't go back to it because when you are in real time, you can't go back to when you just said something, right? So that's why I love taking this test. And I have this with all of my clients in my trainings, that you take this test and it gives you that quick litmus answer of who are you most preferring of this group. There's one really good one on skin tones. You know, there's a lot of talk of colorism, especially in the Black community, how light-skinned Black individuals are favored more and preferred more than darker skin tone African Americans. So there's so many with gender norms and different types of rules. I highly recommend you taking this test, and they don't take your private information by taking this test. So definitely do that. And I know Aubrey put this link in the chat as well. So you're probably thinking to me, okay, Jeb, I got the test, check. I'm going to work on that as soon as we're done talking. You've given good examples, but what can I as a white community member do to establish more authentic connections with our BIPOC community members that we have? And I want you to first and foremost understand that white privilege exists. This is not, oh, this happened. You have the right to ignore things. You have the right to just say, you know what? I hear you, Jeb, but I'm not going to take any action. That's a privilege that you have and that you carry. And understanding that the systems of power in our government, in our educational body, in our corporate offices, in all of these facets that we have are privy and have been established with white privilege in mind, okay? And also know and learn about each cultural group individually. Like I told you before, I am from Liberia. If I have a friend from Kenya, our recipes are going to be different. Our languages are different. In the continent of Africa, we have over 5,000 different tribes and dialects, okay? So when you meet somebody and you assume that I know that person from a different country, and I look at you kind of funny, is because I don't know everybody in Africa, right? So the fact of the matter of people who would ask me, oh, Jebeh, you're African, do you know Ngozi from Nigeria? No, and that's okay. And I'm not asking you to be an expert of every single cultural group, but I'm asking you to be competent to know that every cultural group is different and that we're not a monolith. That's what I'm asking you to do. And meet our BIPOC groups where they are at. After the murder of George Floyd, I can't tell you how many times people slid into my DMs and apologized of things that they did to me 25 years ago, or even last week. I want you to understand of the plight that a lot of us BIPOC individuals have been shouting and saying, enough is enough. And the fact that white Americans come to me and go, well, Jebeh, teach me, educate me. Aren't you the educator? You need to meet me where I'm at. Because when that atrocity happened in real time, I was that Black mother that had to explain it to her children. I was also that Black person in America grieving what I just saw. So if you're coming to me and saying, educate me, I will look at you and say, that is not my responsibility or my job. Unless you want to hire me, I'll give you my consultation rate, but you need to meet us BIPOC individuals where we are at, because we are reliving so much trauma on a day-to-day basis based on the systems that are in place. And also self-evaluate. Notice the blind spots that you may have that can prevent harm. For example, I'm in an interracial marriage. We're going to be married 18 years. And my husband grew up, born and raised in Duluth, Scandinavian roots. And my sister-in-law called and she goes, Jeb, give me, your number for your hairdresser. And I smiled and I said, sweetheart, there's no Black hair salon here. I got to go to Minneapolis to get my hair done. That was her blind spot because she assumed, well, Jebeh has her hair looking fresh every time. Let's ask who does her hair. And I had to remind her that the resources that we have in our Twin Ports area is not conducive and reflective of the people that live here. Are microaggressions the same as racism? They certainly are. I'm going to call it like I see it, because my white husband does not get those type of questions when he's walking in this community by himself as much as I am. Another example, our sons were playing outside in our front yard, and a bunch of high school boys in a Subaru would come in front of our yard for a month, shouting and hurling racist words at my children. They were 6 and 4. I want you to sit with that. And I remember calling the police because, of course, it's harassment. And the officer came back and said, you know, it is their free speech, but it infringed on my children's rights to live. And it got to the point where, you know me, now that you know me, you know I don't just take that first response. And I talked to our former police chief and he handled it. But I wanted to let you know that those are the types of things where somebody that didn't feel as confident in themselves like me would have taken that phone call from the first officer and thought, that's it. What else do I have to prove? They're telling me in the system that good luck. That person is infringing on my children's rights, but they can say whatever they want to say. Another key vocabulary term that's been popping up a lot is tokenism. And I want to say that this is something that is an expectation for you to perform. And a lot of us in our business settings have people of color, but very few of us. In the comments you see at the boardroom, oh, Jeb, you're the Black unicorn. First of all, I'm a human being, not a mythical creature, right? And everybody else in that boardroom looks and says nothing. They are stunned. Oh, the boss must really like you. What a great compliment. Is it though? Is it? Oh, you're all we've got. I know we got thousands of other teachers in the district. It's not just my one. So when you're trying to pay somebody of color a compliment their accomplishment. Don't compliment their outward appearance. All right? That's something to keep in mind. Now, there's something I wanted to share with you too about when we are doing this big movement of highlighting and recruiting and trying to retain our BIPOC colleagues into the workforce. There's this honeymoon phase, we say, where that one individual from a different cultural group comes in, and we have this problem with a woman of color as an example. She comes in, oh, hey, here's your desk, here's your cube, here's how we can get this going. Oh my gosh, I love you. Oh my gosh, we're having a good time. We're doing our thing. And then, oh my gosh, you're like the Black Whoopi Goldberg. Oh my gosh, we know Whoopi Goldberg is Black. That person said that to me and thought it was a good compliment. Trust me, I can't make this up. And so we're going through these types of things. I'm like, oh, okay. And then, then you get through the reality and things start happening. How come this client prefers this colleague versus me? And I'm working on this account, right? Or how come this parent is asking the principal to sit in these meetings and it's about a spelling test? Then you're starting to think, okay, now we're in the reality phase and I'm starting to find my place where I need to be in the lane I should be in. And the response I go, and a lot of us know, oh, Jeb, there's that hierarchy, go to HR, go up the ladder and you set your complaint and document that. And I document, but then there's retaliation. There's the, you know what, Jeb, we're gonna have to let you go. You know, budget cuts and you were the last one hired and you know how it is. Those are the types of realities that we get. Or, you know what, it's so hostile here because of how I'm being treated. I'm just going to leave. I'll take a pay cut. I'll leave my job that I loved so much, but it's not serving me in that feeling of being culturally safe. And so many of those instances, you're going to see 30% of people of color leave their job due to that unwelcoming racial environment. Walking into an office as a grown woman, women coming to me and trying to touch my hair. And I'm dodging, I'm like Jackie Chan in an action movie. And my other colleagues don't get their hair touched. I'm being fetishized. And then the white coworkers, when they, share, oh, you know what? Only a 15% reported that was because of discrimination. Again, it's that safety. If I tell you like it really is, you might not write that letter of recommendation for me to move on. You might tell that, new company that, you know what? I don't like Jebeh's tone. She asks too many questions. I have to protect myself and my livelihood. So that's the kind of things that we face every single day. So you're probably asking, okay, how can I practice when a microaggression does occur? What can we do? And I always say practice makes progress. Here's some best strategies. Do not tolerate bad behavior. Just because it wasn't, sent towards you doesn't mean it isn't hurtful to the individual that received it, right? And a lot of people go, oh, Jeb, I don't want to be the white savior. I'm just so stuck. I want to say something this. Trust and believe. You have way more social capital than I ever could in this country, especially. So if you say, you know what, that phrase isn't welcomed here. That joke is not welcomed here. When we say welcomed, that's when that person goes, oh, well, and then they start to flub and they start to get defensive, right? But when you say it's not welcomed here, it sets that precedent. Or you can even ask, Jebeh, I can't even imagine how you're feeling right now. That hurt my heart. Do you want to take action? Yes, I will take action, but thank you for validating what was said. All right? I can save myself. You're not saving me, but you can validate what has been said. And keep your policies inside and out. Know what they are. Is the language or the verbiage making people feel excluded? Think about that. And then you're setting up your system of reporting the racist, sexist, and other discriminatory behavior without retaliation. You know as well as I do, oh, we've got an open door policy. But what if the person giving the harm is holding that door? Think about it. What other channels do I have that I can use to protect myself and also report that harm has been done? Okay? And I want you to create a culture for your team to make them feel welcomed and valued in the organization. There's a big difference of including others, but also making them feel valued is huge, because you can include people of color anytime you want. But like I said, the tokenization comes in, the second guessing, the micromanaging, that all comes into play. So you need to go back into your organizations and think, how can we create a culture where we all feel valued and welcomed at the same place? So here's something I want us to open up for some chats. I'm going to give 2 examples. I would love for a couple people to kind of share out an experience that they might have had. Please don't listen to names, but I want you to think about in the past, what have you done when you heard a microaggression and how did you respond? So I'm going to have Aubrey kind of open up that piece, but I just want you to kind of sit with that for a little bit. How did you respond? Yeah, go ahead. So you want me to turn my sound up? Okay.
So I'd actually like to share a story to start us off. So when I was working in the wedding industry, so in the wedding industry, you sometimes have to work with difficult people. And my boss at the time had been informed by our sales team that this particular family held some biases, and one of our dishwashers was a person of color. And so my boss decided to handle that by sitting down with him and with me. So I was an event manager. This was my upper boss. And telling him, hey, just so you know, we have a family coming in that doesn't like Black people, so you probably shouldn't walk in the hallway. And I remember just like open mouth staring at her. I was so embarrassed. I was so mortified. And I looked at him and I said, no, you can walk in the hallway. And if someone messes with you or says anything, you come to me and I will handle that for you. And I just looked at her like, you really thought that was the proper way to handle that? And how horrible that must have made him feel. So I just think it's really important, like, to correct. I didn't care what she thought. I didn't care if she got mad at me. I just did not want, I felt it was my job. I was a manager too, to make that employee feel like we were gonna back him if anything happened. And I just thought she handled that so poorly. So it's okay to call out, no, that's not the right thing to say. let's reorient here. And thankfully nothing happened, but just to say, don't walk in the hallways. Like, how is he supposed to use the restroom? You know, that was so dehumanizing. And so it's scary to speak up, but it's the right thing to do. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing, Aubrey. Any others?
Hi, Miss Jebeh. It's Amber. You and I had met a couple of months ago, actually, and had coffee. I wanted to briefly share an experience that I had where I couldn't actually step up and take action, and it hurts. It hurts because I couldn't stand up for my friend, and honestly, without retaliation and getting in trouble myself. When I was active duty, we would experience a lot of microaggressions, not only because I was a female active duty member, but also my best friend and the godmother to my children is a person of color and also a woman. And so therefore, she was actually put into a whole different department because our higher ups didn't appreciate where she was and who she was and how. And so it actually still hurts to this day. And I've been out of the service for almost 10 years now. And Kinnear and I are still best friends and still love her to pieces. And I'm so happy she's thriving now that she has also gotten out. But it was a major switch, and that's just the culture, and that's just what it is. And unfortunately, I lost my position because I was friends with her, and we both ended up getting out.
Thank you so much, Amber, for sharing. It's very real. It's very real. We have another one in the chat as well. Aubrey's another one in the chat. We'll take one more.
So Christy says, we believe you promote what you permit, so we don't permit it in our work culture. We speak up right away to correct it and set the example of professionalism. And Christy's with Vita Pizza. So thank you for setting those standards, Christy. That's really important.
Thank you, Christy, as well. Yes, I taught her children too at school when they were in 5th grade. I appreciate your candor, folks that have shared. Thank you. It's very hard to put yourself out there. I understand. So thank you. I also want you folks to continue with my slide here. This is your own self-reflective work, is to think of a time when you were confused about a situation involving diversity, race, etc. And how did you respond? A lot of you, when you're doing the self-reflective work, are going to be thinking, oh, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? It's never too late. I always say, you know, when we move this process forward, we're going to step in some things. We're going to be confused sometimes. And not a lot of people are going to like you. So for you to stay in your truth and share what is not right, no matter what the consequences are, at least you can leave that situation going, you know what, I did the right thing. I said something, or I acted in a way of making sure that this harm is not going to happen again. That's something that we all can do. One more quick story before we continue. Thinking about when we're talking about implicit bias and microaggressions, you know, going to my husband's side, he had his little cousin was getting married, and it was on our anniversary last summer in Somerset, Wisconsin. And I knew I was going to be the only Black woman there. And my mother, when she raised me and my, 3 younger sisters, she goes, when you walk into the room, especially the only African one there, you better look good. And so I had my beautiful dress on, my heels looking good. And I'm at this wedding reception and this wedding ceremony. And this white woman comes, looks at me the whole time, just staring at me. I'm like, man, thank you, White House black market. I am looking to down, right? And I'm like, oh, she just keeps staring at me. She must be, you know. After the ceremony, she walks up to me and she asked me this question: who do you belong to? And I just looked at her, and my husband literally took our kids and ran into the reception hall like, oh my gosh, you don't say that to her. And I looked at her, I said, first of all, I belong to God. And second of all, I'm an Edmunds, and this is our family. I've known that little girl since she was 5. And she goes, oh, well, I know the groom. He was in my son's Cub Scouts. I said, So when you get into situations like that, again, I had to think of my response. Because one, I'm in the middle of nowhere. It's my husband's family. And my behavior, trust me, like James Brown, makes me want to holler, right? But I can't, you know? And those are the things too. I even had my husband do his own self-reflection and go, what could you have done differently, right? We all have work to do. So I want you to leave this talk today, and I want you to just ask yourself these questions. You know, am I being kind to my Black colleague? Am I going to that Black colleague at the, copy machine and go, you had long hair yesterday, but now your hair's short. How is that? Microaggression, I'm just keeping my hair fresh. That's what we do in our culture, right? You don't have to ask that. Just make your copies and keep it moving, right? Does my colleague or employee feel comfortable around? What am I doing that is impending harm? Think of that. I also created an inclusive workplace model. And with that, I can send it to you too when we have our follow-up. It's really good that talks about leadership and accountability. Who are the leaders? And it doesn't have to have a leader with a title to be a leader within your organization. Thinking about how we can level up our inclusive workplace. Also, including our global and diverse talent that we already have. We have major universities right in our backyard. When my parents left, Liberia during the biggest conflict of a coup d'etat, and we settled in Minnesota, trust me, it wasn't for the weather. Okay, it was for job opportunity in their fields of economics and education. And also that self-evaluation, your implicit bias test, surveying your clients and your colleagues in an anonymous way so you get the best results you can. And then your measured goals. When you're doing this DEI work, it's not a one-a-year thing. It's not a one and done, check the box. I want you to do this quarterly. I want you to do this, every 3 months if you could. I want you to set a plan where you are still having this in your focus. It also may require the employee to overcome many obstacles, especially as a woman of color, to leave their cultural norms at the door. So for example, being Liberian, right? I have to code switch my vernacular. My Liberian English, if I'm speaking it to you right now, ma'am, my people, thank you for coming, yeah. I am so happy to do this, so talk with y'all. You will look at me going, what is she saying? I have to switch it up to assimilate with the majority culture, all right? And those are the things that were taught to me by my parents to say, oh, leave that Liberian English at home, Jeb, because they will deem you as unintelligent. But to me, I'm multilingual because I know linguistically how to turn it into the vernacular to speak and bond with my Liberian community and my relatives. So those are the things a lot of us people of color do to check ourselves before we walk into the door. And that's when you're working in a diverse group, a lot of us assimilate in order to appease the majority. And our children are watching and observing our actions as well. So when I leave with you today, think of an exclusionary time when you saw a practice happen at work and in your community. I know you can list some examples. And lastly, just say something, getting a text message under the table. Dang, Jeb, I can't believe that person said that to you. Say it. Now I'm the one trying to compose myself and get myself ready for either my classroom or for an event. But you were right there, At the snowbank, oh, that's their father? Are they adopted? Say something. You know me and my family. Yeah, that's their father. Yes, they're an interracial family. Say something. You're not stepping on my toes. You're not explaining in a way to make me feel shame, but you're actually going to be the advocate and the ally that you say you are. Ally is a verb, folks, when it comes to this work. Another homework assignment, I love this speaker, author, Thais Selassie. Her title of her TED Talk is Don't Ask Me Where I'm From, Ask Where I'm a Local. A lot of us people of color who've been here, I've been in the Twin Ports area for 25 years. And even in my neighborhood in East Duluth, people still come out to me and say, where are you from? Are you lost? And it's very interrogative. And a lot of us, when we're trying to make those connections, those are usually our default questions. But ask, where are you a local? Oh, I'm a local from the Twin Cities. Oh, wonderful. So am I, or my uncle lived there. That's how you can build those true, authentic cultural connections. And it's time to acknowledge and see color. You see a Black woman speaking in front of you today. It's okay to say, I'm Black, because I'm proud to be Black. But I also want you to self-reflect and go, why do I have a visceral reaction when Jebeh says, ooh, Black girl magic, right? Or Black Lives Matter. We are calling out the systems and the construct that was already in place and taking pride of who we are. We are not doomed to act on our unconscious biases, but we can't overcome them unless we know what they look like and where they live. We got to check and correct our implicit bias. And you can purposely invite diverse people into your life, and hopefully they will challenge you and give you new insights to life. Trust and believe. You know, we're all in this human experience together, but to know that you really are my friend or my colleague is truly a person who would step up and do what is right. I am so excited to share with you more. If you'd like to learn more about my resources, you can find it on my website, jebehedmunds.com. I have a podcast, the Cultural Curriculum Chat. It was deemed one of the best multicultural educational podcasts out there in 2021 by Welt Magazine. I have a YouTube channel, Mrs. Edmunds Cultural Corner, where I talk all things diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the classroom and in the workplace. And those are my social media handles. And thank you, St. Scholastica and the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity to share my work with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jebeh. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Jebeh? And just a reminder that Jebeh is available for hire for a session. If you want to have a DEI session, we've done one here at the Chamber and plan to do many more. And it was extremely helpful in just kind of making a DEI action plan, the inclusive workplace model. And it was really interesting for us all to take the implicit bias test as well. So I really recommend checking that out after this if you haven't taken it. One thing I noticed is I've taken it like 3 times since college to now, and my responses have changed a lot as I've become more integrated in inclusion work, which is really cool. So you can also see the progress you're making if you kind of take it year by year. So that's kind of a fun thing as well. Anyone have any questions they want to ask on audio or throw into the chat before we log off today? And I know that we will, this will be loaded onto YouTube, and Jebeh will send out some resources after this as well, if there are no questions. Lots of thanks in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are no questions, you can always feel free to reach out to Jebeh via email if you think of a question. But we will end the session a little bit early. Lots of thank yous coming through. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we really look forward to having you involved in this work, and look for an email, and we'll get it up on YouTube as well if you'd like to share it with you.
Thanks, everyone.
This ends the session. Thank you, everyone.